It's awfully good for managing society and getting laws passed. I love to pass laws. As I say, quickly mention it, and people will still vote. Left wing, right wing, oh, well, get this. And that's what they say too. You don't vote new politicians in. You simply vote the present bunch out. You're so sick of them. Because they generally break every law that they said that they'd defend or whatever it happens to be. But as long as they get the agendas done and signed and all the agreements for further integration of NAFTA or whatever it happens to be, or global integration with transatlantic treaty and pan this and pan that treaties. This goes way back to the early 1900s, the same organization with all of its different amalgamation treaties. Hasn't changed. It's the biggest club on the planet as far as power goes. But they don't like to talk about themselves much. They used to bring on members on television to advise governments, just for the TV. And they'd say, member of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or Council on Foreign Relations, or the European Institute for International Affairs, or the Far Eastern Pacific group, blah, blah, to advise, without going into where the group actually, where they got their authority from. They gave it to themselves. That's where they got it from. In a sense, and again, they completely infiltrate. Most of them in high levels of government are members as well. But they don't mention that when they run. They don't tell you that when they run for politics. Or they'll say, we're not members at the moment. I mean, they'll left their club for the moment. That's what they pretend to you. But the very fact they've been in it in the first place tells me all I need to know. Because they never leave. They never leave. Come on. But you're not supposed to think about that. Think about the cost of living. Think about your day-to-day struggles, because most folk have struggles. The people who don't have struggles don't worry about what's coming down the pike. They're always the ones that go into utter shock when it actually happens. Because traditionally, the way to see who hits first is the bottom strata first. Well, I'm okay, it's not boring me. And I can get by, I can afford it, blah, blah, blah. And they're always shocked when something hits them too. Always. I mean, really, really shocked. And they let it happen. Because when they could have said something, they say nothing. Most folk want to be safe. I'm all right, Jack. Don't give me any problems. I don't want to hear that. It's unpleasant. And if you look at the history of the world, the most unpleasant things that have ever happened because everybody shut up over a generation at least and let it happen. And since we're into the system, well into the system, and I know what's coming down the pike with this complete cashless society, it isn't just cashless, oh, I don't mind a cashless society. It's everything that goes with it you don't understand. I've given talks before of the big players who helped develop and create the part of history you're going through right now with your cultural changes and your laws. Many of them, and actually maybe most of them, are actually dead now, but they planned it in the last century and wrote about it in great detail. And they worked with big working groups with the CFR, with the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and the Pacific group as well. But they planned with groups to develop new cultures. And Bertrand Russell talks about it in good detail about that, the scientific time, when they would run it all through the appearance of science, right down to eventually government, just like the old communist idea. Don't think that communism is a different agenda here. All experiments were run by the same bunch, if you haven't quite got that. And incredibly well studied to see what they can get from the best and combine them together. But Bertrand Russell, who was a lord, remember, and lords don't have any intention of giving up what they own and the privileges they have at all. They have no intentions of that. And he talked about how government eventually would put so much, it could be credits, call it whatever you want, Bing's, credit, whatever you want. It makes no difference at all what your seed is called. And your little tokens, and they'll put them into a bank for you. It doesn't even have to be a real bank, you see, it can be electronic. And they'll give you the same amount across the board according to your working strata, because the class system is awfully alive and well, even in communist China. And to be good, you can withdraw what you need out of it for that, say, 2-week period. But you can't, anything you don't use at the end of that is gone when more is put into it next time by the government. So you can't save it up. They not all be equal at that strata. But above you, there'll be a different system altogether for those above. And that's the privileged system. The ones who, quotation marks, serve the system. The bureaucratic elites and all the NGO groups and so on, and the commissars. That's what it's all about. But if you're bad, or you've asked the wrong questions, and now it's down to even asking the question when you're not allowed to, you didn't know it, because even questionings about certain things are illegal now. They'll withdraw, they'll stop, put a hold on you, your money or your credits, and you can't get it out to pay your rent or anything, so you suffer. No food, blah, blah, that will teach you. Look at the Chinese system. China is a model state for the world. And they're using their likes and dislikes for a form of social approval and disapproval. Now, they can generate as many sock puppet fake answers as they want to your little thing, your little site. And right down to every purchase you make and so on. What do you think of me buying this? Was it a good thing I bought this eco-friendly, blah, blah, blah? And you get all the approvals or disapprovals. And that goes right down to how you're viewed by your government. Your government runs it all, you see. Whether you're going to get credit cards or not credit cards. Where you'll be allowed and you see certain state-sponsored, say, shows or whatever, are not allowed into it. Punishment and reward, punishment and reward. The model state for the world. You have no idea what's really going on. And this incredible layer of almost invisible and to the most of the public unknown bureaucracy, strata upon strata upon strata of bureaucracy, dealing with all of this. Never mind the neuroscientists and psychologists, blah, 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 blah. And all types of economists working together, and legalists, etc. None of this is mentioned when you vote what you think is your main candidate in. You know, the personality you're going to get in to rule you think. What a joke. And you know, too, it's just like Trump and you know that neocons are just continuing it hasn't stopped the massive wars, perpetual war. I read the articles from the military's own magazines at the time. Perpetual war, they called it. That's how it's going to be. And it isn't just a war to standardize the whole world for the masters of the world that you do have and you don't vote in. It's a war against all of your claimed rights. Rights of independence, rights of having a mind of your own, rights of being able to say what you think. It's a perpetual war. Haven't you got it yet? Haven't you got it? Because you're seeing the same approval, disapproval here in Canada and the States and elsewhere as you're seeing in China. See, we had it first before China got it. You haven't quite realized that, have you? Well, don't expect the media to tell you. Although lots will copy what I'm saying here and tell you now. But what I'm getting at too is the reality of how everything really is. Back to Trump, and then back further to Obama. Obama was the new guy who was going to end all the wars, right? I think there was 3 wars in the go the US had at the time. When he left, there was about 7 or 9 of them. He got the Peace Prize. So you got to knock off a few countries before you get that prize. And I can remember Donald Rumsfeld congratulating Obama for continuing the same neocon agenda as the neocons had before him, you see. And now there's Trump in as well. There's a lot more I could say. I could talk about books that were written by people who were allowed to write books about the groups that were behind a lot of it. So it doesn't matter who you vote, even if you've got a really naive person, and Trump isn't naive, even if you were Truman from the Truman Show, utterly naive, you would soon be put straight as to how the world is going to be run. While you're in, you wouldn't even need to be told why it's going to be run that way. You'd just be told it's going to be. And if you didn't cooperate, the whole establishment and all the media wouldn't cooperate with you either, because they're all owned as well. The saddest thing for people to learn is how much people generally are sellouts to each other. Complete sellouts. Complete, utterly. And it's disgusting for money, as I say, filthy lucre, how they'll sell out everybody that they know, and even their own people, or even a class. It makes no difference at all. It's pretty disgusting, actually. When you see that, you might go into depression for a while if you're really naive. And most folk are. But that's how bad it really is. There's a massive system that's been here long before you were born, and it planned a world order. And the world order, by the way, I love how people will poo-poo you if you mention that word, even though the elite themselves have churned out book after book for the last 100 years with titles like World Order or The Coming World Order, etc., etc. How about Jack Satali as an example, just one. Winners and losers in the coming world order. And presidents do it too. But isn't it amazing how they can take reality, the media, if you say it, if they've targeted you, and make you sound like a nutcase for saying it? Because most folk won't even read or they have no idea. I had a cop once ask me, well, a little joke, what about the New World Order, eh? You know? I saw this man says, well, what are you talking about? I rattled off about 5 to him as his jaw dropped. And titles of the books by reputable people. But anyway, that's how it really is. That's what it really is. It runs a system is something vastly different. You're only going through a little journey here. Your own life here is a little journey. And everybody before you was in their little journey, and like once they come after you. And each phase of it all is already planned on a massive scale of what has to be accomplished in your time. All you have to do is pay for it all and do what you're told. That's really how it is. And suffer too. If they want you to suffer, you're going to suffer. Now, I'll put a link up tonight. John Pilger had a video out last year, I think it was, about China and America and their relations and so on. Right down to possible war with China. But it's a dramatic title, etc. But he's awfully good as a documentary filmmaker. And he's one of the few that actually goes to places and puts his life on the line at times to get stories and to get the truth. He's definitely far left, and he doesn't criticize China much at all. But in the documentary, he will, if you really look at it, he'll show you the incredible amount of bases America has around China. But he also shows you bureaucrats within China give the same kind of bureaucratic spiel that we're used to, with the kind of face, a little smile, like they don't believe it themselves, and that's how they do it. Listen to it, that's how they do it. They're all the same the world over. It doesn't matter what system they pretend they're in. And you'll see the one, for instance, a younger fella in China who's an economist too or something, but he's very successful, and they get awfully lots of, just like we do in our countries. Our unelected bureaucrats, these organizations I'm talking about, they're just there, they run everything. We don't vote them in. Your government doesn't even mention them to you. They'll get these incredible privileges that you can't get. Well, you see them in China with the massive buildings they're allowed to live in, huge, big, gated communities, and lots of perks. And what you're seeing is a class. I see a class system where John Pilger goes into it or not. You're seeing a really class system. Of course you are. And they'll say, well, our difference is our government rules over the capitalist system, so it can't dominate us and tell us what to do. Who's kidding who? If you have a big money system, and you have people who are getting hypnotized with the glitter of the coinage there, and churning out millionaires and even billionaires, and you have people managing that money and trade and what's going to be worth, you are at the mercy of those who rule the money system. Even if you pretend it's your own government that runs it, you're kidding yourselves. And that's all I'll say in that. But anyway, you'll enjoy it. John Pilger does definitely do a good job. But sometimes doesn't ask a lot of hard enough questions with the right people. I don't see any good guys anywhere on the planet, actually. And don't forget that China is an essential part to the Western world, because the groups I'm talking about here, like the Russian International Affairs and CFR, they set up the massive trading blocks. They set up the World Trade Organization. They set up the transport of all your factories to China, physical transportation of all tooling and etc. We paid for all your tax money, paid for it. I've given talks before. Go into the archives at cuttingthroughmirrors.com. By the way, send me a buck or two if you can, once in a while as well. You'll see how to do it at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. Or buy the books there, get the discs as well. But I've given so many talks about this, how it's done, how it's set up, and how that had a massive crash. and loss of economy and manufacturing jobs. We, through our tax money, paid for them all to move, all these big so-called patriotic corporations. Who's kidding who, eh? they keep the names of their tooling and stuff and sell you the stuff back at there should be a fraction of the cost, but no. What they do is they have a fraction of the cost of manufacturing, but the prices stay the same or go up even higher. Incredible, eh? Isn't it? But yeah, you're free. You're living in a very fair and just world, so let them rule over you, these people. That's okay. And you'll never catch on. Never catch on. And the wars continue, perpetual wars for the big military-industrial complex. And guess who loses? You'll lose back home. You always lose back home. Look at the state Britain's in. Look at the state of it. The murder is getting towards the stabbing murder rate is higher than New York. It's roughly the same population size, but it's higher than New York and getting worse. Now they're calling it the carnage to come this summer because it's going to escalate. And they know what's causing it. They know as bring more people in from across different countries, they're going to get more and more of it. They know what this. Of course they do. And it makes you wonder if it's planned that way. It has to be. I want to put up a whole bunch of articles from Canada to do with the World Refugee Council. If you didn't know you had one, it's been here for an awful long time. And CG is a big part of it in Waterloo, Canada. That's to do with global governance, CG. And Waterloo University is involved in a lot of the studies too. They're always studying us all under the microscope and planning things too. You don't vote them in, but they do it anyway. And use your tax money, of course. But they talk about greater political accountability necessary to reform refugee system. And you have a Mr. Axworthy here in Canada, who's been a lifer, I think, so probably the CFR, but because it's a CG thing, which is CFR. I'll put up the members of this World Council. Trying to find how much money they get is not so easy, but it's phenomenal, as you can imagine. And they've got tremendous power to, they don't call it immigration anymore, they call it big mass migration. That's what they're looking at. The same terms I saw back in the 70s, coming from the Rockefeller Foundation, who were working on that at the time too, what was to come, what they wanted to come, etc. And that's what you've got. And don't forget too, with free trade, very few folk read it, and you'll see it's also the free flow of goods and labour, but it's also, now they forget this labour, don't even work now, just people across the world, for those who haven't got it. But it's a one-way street because you can't go to those countries that they're coming out of and just go and live. It's just open border for those coming in. And that's how it's planned. And I'll put up information on Lloyd Norman Axworthy. These are people who they call statesmen. They put them way up there and to all these top positions and things which you don't even know exist. But it's incredible. He's also, I think, up there with the World Federalist Organization. A very old organization to transform the world into the system we're talking about here. So why bother voting for people when they're already members of all these different things to do away with your countries, and you still vote for them as though they were a national government? It's a joke. I'll put up a PDF too on this organization, on the council members of the World Refugee Council, and their goals, etc. I'm also going to put up too the digital economy, jobs of the future, and the emergence of a new social compact. You should take these terms very seriously, because it's the IMF headquarters dreamed it up for you, International Monetary Fund. Again, we're talking about one massive organization here, and where they're going with it all. Also, I'm putting up good articles on Britain's first WhatsApp fingerprint conviction, which led to a flood of new cases. Police have revealed after a criminal was caught using a photograph of his hand holding drugs. And you think it's all there to help you, all this technology. You're in the biggest prison that's been built, and they make you buy your chains. Never ends. Never mind the fact that all this, on-screen touch and so on. It was all to get your fingerprints in the first place, but this is actually photographing you, touching something else, and then get your fingerprints from it. They've got everybody sussed out completely. This is the prison you're in. Way beyond this whole idea of you're going through right now, the broken eggs phase of mass migrations and all the fallout that comes with it, and welfare, and countries plummeting with the cost of it all. But that's just a thing that will come and go. What we're looking at now is a long-term thing, which is total observation 24 hours a day of every single person, without exception, except for those who get privileges above, just like they had in 1984, where O'Brien could bring in Winston to his own place and turn off the television monitor with Big Brother on it as a privilege that they got above, you see. There's nothing that's happening now that wasn't thought of long ago. And also, you'll find Commonwealth Games facial recognition software to stay, but when will it be used? The Queensland government won't say. They're putting it in too for the games. And it's all to save you and to help you and protect you and all that stuff, because it never leaves once it's all done. I'll put that there too. Also, again, the digital economy, jobs of the future, and the emergence of a new social compact. It's awfully important. I've mentioned it 3 times already, but the fact is, look it up and look at it. It's the new social compact. And also, I'll put up a whole bunch of articles in the White Helmets. In fact, because there's some articles in Britain. I think Panorama did one, the BBC Panorama, of how literally they're a front group and they're pretty well fake, and they're well funded by Britain and other countries too. One of them was in 2017. It's the UK FCO financing terrorism in Syria with taxpayer funds. We know they were, for goodness sake. The West funded all the different morphing of the same group that kept fighting against the government in Syria. You know that's true. It can't be denied. Whether you like it or not, the fact is. See, it's not, I don't take sides, I'm just telling you if you like it or not. The fact is, your governments are overthrowing countries one after another. And each one is a mess with mass migration flooding out. They destroy countries almost into the Stone Age. And that was their plan too. And you're left to pay for it all in many different ways, including back home with the mass migrations into your countries of folk who literally haven't got a clue about your culture, your laws, or even care about them in many cases. Also, Pink Floyd frontman leaks email exposing how White Helmets recruit celebrities with Saudi Arabian money. That's another one too. And there's nothing new in that as well. But also, US State Department Spock plays dumb on White Helmet's funding question as well, because they can't keep it under wraps anymore about the White Helmets. Mind you too, a lot of this is, these groups are set up, and I'll put one of them up for you to look at. There was an ex-mercenary set up, the so-called massive so-called charitable group to funnel money to these places to entrain them. You wouldn't believe what really goes on. Nothing is ever what it seems to be. Nothing is. And also one of the children that they used for the washing off all the toxic stuff, and it was put across the world by the Western media. Oh, look, they've done it. And they got this child talking about it, say, we just snatched off the street into the hospital, taken upstairs and scrubbed down under the camera. And his dad talks about it, saying there's nothing wrong with them. There was nothing happened there. They just made a video of it, and he wasn't even coded with anything. He was fine. In fact, they say he was more at risk of getting a cold from getting soaked and left naked and wet than because nothing else had happened. But quite a few articles on the White Helmets and so on too. Nothing, as I say, nothing is what it seems to be. It's really sad, isn't it? How we're deceived and deceived and deceived. And it goes on and on and on. Now I'm going to put up an article on the police culture now in Britain, which I'm sure is the same elsewhere too, across Europe, to see just what the shenanigans that go on with the culture of those who are now called police today. That's quite amazing. Another one too is also a detective who is in the brothel industry in Britain. As I said, ties right in, of course, is that some of the articles I mentioned a few weeks ago with top ex-police chiefs in Canada in on their shares on the legalizing of the drug industry. They'll have their shares in the corporations that are allowed to grow it and sell it, I suppose. What can you do with a system that's falling apart like that, eh? What can you say? And also, too, as I say, the articles to do with the carnage coming up, and in some respect, the knifings all over in Europe to escalate like crazy. It's all these different gangs that are now there. And let's be honest, a lot of them too have come in recently, put it that way. It's easy pickings in a country that's fallen apart with its common sense and it's resolved. That's what happens. Terrible, isn't it? And the Liberal government in Canada, now that they're legalising all the cannabis, etc., proposed decriminalisation of illegal drug use in simple possession, but they're talking about other drugs as well. So, and also they're now bitching about the Supreme Court's free the beer ruling sparks fears of cannabis trade restrictions and then passing between province to province, etc. As the big boys at the top decide who's going to get most of the business and where they can trade it and sell it and so on. We're all going the same way, aren't we? We're all going the same way, all the countries. Planned that way too. But the ones at the top, don't think for an instant that they're going to suffer from any of this. They will not suffer at all themselves. They don't live amongst you. They don't. And we'll all die off gradually. You know that's going to happen too. And the population, that might take 30 years, will be reduced bit by bit by bit by bit across the whole planet gradually. Now what I do too, remember, is that I'm not giving you bad news. I'm just giving you things as they are. For those who can handle the news, at least want to know what's happening and how it happens. Because some people resent this covert way of managing us, this herd management. We resent it. And we're given the choice to vote the same. Doesn't matter what party you pick, they're all the same. They must do what their masters tell them, and the masters have never been the people. That's the way it is. Think about it. Well, since Grundy the groundhog is out, and hopefully stay out now, I hope to get some decent weather and hope you do too. For myself, Alan Watt from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.